from Mike 14. Is Mike 14 working? I love Mike 14 the best.
Are we good? Hold on. Wherever you slide center. No.
There are opinions up there.
How would I? Testing it.
Oh.
So you guys are good to go.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. I'm surprised they give it to me. It's risky. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys. The behind. All right, good morning on a beautiful day in Chicago. Why are we inside, you guys? It's blue and not freezing. Today, before I introduce today's speakers, just a general welcome. Usually we say a minute about who we are, and I was all queued up to do something a little, not radically different, but of course I screwed it up. So what I'm going to do today is read our values statement to explain who we are through that. We have a mission, vision, and values statements. You can find them on our website, but I'm going to read the values statement. We value the importance of living an ethical, responsible, and joyful life. We promote intellectual, philosophical, and artistic freedom, avoiding dogma and rigid creed. We nurture a sense of wonder about life, nature, and the universe, and are inspired by positive models of human achievement. Shaped by the forces of humanism, democracy, science, and religious reform, we cherish human diversity and we focus on what we have in common, not what keeps us apart. So that's something. Hopefully that helped. I've been a member for 175 years, give or take. And like very many people came via the kids program when my kids were little. One of them was silly enough to say, how come everyone else gets to go to Sunday school and I don't? So we looked around and found a secular Sunday school, and the kids are grown up and doing other things, and I'm still here. So that's a common gateway. The Sunday school is a gateway drug for this community often, but there are other avenues to connect. Today's program, I proposed it to the program committee because I have been active in the mutual aid work around the District 19 police station. For those of you who have ever been to a baseball game, you were a block away from the District 19 police station on it's just east of Wrigley on Addison. And as you all know, several tens of thousands of people have come to Chicago over the last year from the southern border on buses sent to us from Texas, and they've posed a big challenge, realistically, for communities across the city and for themselves. Like, these people need help. So the mutual aid community that's grown up there is very important to me and inspiring to me, and I thought it would be helpful. Mutual aid, by definition, doesn't have a leader, so there's nobody with a fancy title and a big degree and institutional weight behind them to talk to us. So I've actually just relied on the kindness of really nice volunteers to sort of share their perspective as people who have been very involved and very concerned about how we as Chicago truly welcome outsiders and help them thrive in their new communities. So I'm going to introduce you to today's two speakers, and then we're going to set it up like a little bit of a conversation. I'm going to like Oprah this thing, I guess. Jenn Torres and Schaffer are both moms of 3 children. who are Chicago public school kids. And Jenn is a program manager at a social service agency when she's not spending 100 billion hours a week doing this. And Jenny has been an elected representative to the District 19, my police station's district council, which is a new construct in Chicago to give communities some engagement and oversight up to the local police districts. So Jenny is actually got a Chicago email address, but both of them are here today just as moms and people who live in the neighborhood and who really care about how this plays out for our new neighbors. So nothing is official, and they're just nice, thoughtful people that we're lucky to have here today. So with that intro, I'm gonna start, and we're gonna do this for about 35, 40 minutes. We'll have our normal little interlude, and then it's time for Q&A, and you guys will be welcome to ask questions. If you're watching this online, you'll have a chance to enter your little questions in the chat, and through the miracle of technology that I do not understand, it will show up on my phone, and I'll ask it. So that's the deal, and I'm gonna go ahead and start, all right? And you don't have to know which is Jenny and which is Jenn, but they really are two different people with very similar names. So the very first question, because I think it's a novel concept for many people, what is mutual aid? Who wants to try?
Sure, I'll start. And I knew this question was coming, and I wanted a very thoughtful answer because I think mutual aid can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. So I looked at a couple definitions and picked the one that felt like the most truest to me, and it comes from a trans activist named Dean Spade. And he said, it's a form of political participation in which people take responsibility for caring for one another and changing political conditions, not just through symbolic acts or putting pressure on the representatives in government, but by actually building new social relations that are more survivable. So I kind of think of it as like a system that's like an antidote to the capitalist system that we are currently swimming in. It's people who have resources are able to give resources to people who need it in efforts of building a stronger community for everyone.
And for me, if my mic isn't working, can I borrow yours? Yeah. I can use Jenny's. Yeah? Okay. For me, I think as a mom, and my kids are 10, 7, and 7, so for the last decade, I've really appreciated the community in Chicago that I've lived in and the other parents that I've met, and how we created a community for ourselves and our children. And from that context and perspective, I'd like to welcome our new neighbors arriving into that kind of community that I had the benefit of experiencing. So that's the perspective that I think from my personal experience I come to it with. It's mutually to me, in my experience, is creating connections with people. In some cases, actually creating long-term relationships with people who, when the relationship starts, you may have more power in the relationship because you have access to resources and you speak the language and you know how to maneuver through systems in the city and in this country. But as you develop your relationship with this person, in some cases that you do, you become friends and they become active members of the community, and you also find that you benefit from this relationship. So it's not a charity situation, and it's not a situation where you don't know who's receiving. It is a relationship that you're developing, and ideally a friendship where you're creating a community where friendship happens and people grow roots and feel like they're also Chicagoans over time.
Thanks. The next question I planned was, I'm going to ask each of you in turn to answer this one. How did you get involved in supporting these newcomers, and what are some of the specific roles or tasks you've been involved in, just to give people a flavor of what does this actually look like in time and space?
Yeah, I can start with that one. So it coincided, the election of the district councils coincided very much with the huge rise of migrants that were coming to Chicago, and obviously they were staying in the police station, and so it became one of our unexpected. We campaigned for many months about what this position would look like, and never imagined including or talking about migrants, but clearly it was a situation that we all had to kind of dive feet first into. So one of the first things I did as district council member was go to the 19th district and talk to them about what's going on, how we can best help. One of the things that was most important to me, we live in a very resource-rich community. I knew there'd be a lot of people who wanted to be able to give what they could, and I wanted to make sure we created a unified response around it. I didn't want people to be, you know, dropping off shirts here, or like having 3 meals one day dropped off and no meals another day dropped off. So really creating a framework for what a mutual aid support system at the district could look like was kind of where I got in. And to be honest, I got in very deeply at the beginning, and now that it has grown so much and the amazing amount of people that we have wanting to help, I've been able to back up a little bit and let other people are doing that work and focus more on the district council work. But things that we did at the very beginning were to set up structures so that we could have meals for the migrants, 3 meals a day. They had the basic clothing and things that they needed. We set up a free store at the church right across the street where they could come during certain hours and get supplies. We had other hours where we had volunteers come and sort through the stuff and make sure that it was an organized way when people came. We organized showers for them, and just making sure that they had the very basic of necessities so that they felt welcome as much as they possibly could when they were sleeping on the floor in a police station, understanding that that was not the best place for any of them. Was a lot of what we did.
Yep. Yep.
For me, how did I get involved? So I'm a, is it working?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I'm a member of a Facebook group called the Refugee Community Connection, and I think there's almost 14,000 members now. I think, you know, before the buses arrived, it might have been like, you know, a few thousand. So there's a lot of people in the city that are involved in the Chicago area. And it's really inspiring, the level of volunteerism that people who are members of this Facebook page provide, who oftentimes never meet each other. There's no physical space. So you join the page and, you know, you're seeing the incredible things people are doing, and it's inspiring. And you can see ways that you can get involved, and there are many ways. So with the Refugee Community Connection, before the buses from the southern border arriving, most of the support was for, at that time, Afghan asylum seekers coming into the country. And welcome groups were formed with groups of volunteers. When the buses started arriving, one of the first shelters was in my neighborhood, 3 blocks from my house. So I transitioned over to seeing how I could support people living at the shelter who literally were my new neighbors. And there were other people through the Refugee Community Connection who were gathering clothes for them. You know, this was, you know, the end of September, beginning of October, when I got involved, and people were cold coming from Venezuela, so they were welcoming winter coats and things that we, you know, were just starting to think about for the fall weather. So we, you know, with the networks that we had in the communities, we were able to get lots of donations and lots of volunteers and sort things to get to people. And through that experience, that was like a diving springboard into just so many different avenues of volunteering that I've been involved in over the past year, including the police station support through our police station up in Westridge, where I actually live, District 24, which closed, and then I switched to District 19, where my kids go to school.
Oh, I don't need that. I have my own. Can you describe a specific interaction, experience, or episode with newcomers or those who are working with them that has stayed with you? Like something sort of transformative or provocative, whether it's good or bad, like whether it was made you just warmed your heart or whether it just made you crazy mad.
Yeah, so without sharing names, I can tell a story of a family through this welcome group for the shelter. a member of the group, so this is over a year ago, posted a family arrived last night, and it was a very cold night. Actually, it was beginning of December. It was a freezing cold night, and they had arrived in the middle of the night at O'Hare Airport and had expected someone to meet them there who didn't. And through networks, someone did meet them, but they needed warm clothes, so the ask was for warm clothes. And I went to Goodwill and got exactly the size the child needed of clothes and brought it to the home of the person who had found them on the street that night, and met the boy and thought, I need to get him into school where my children go, which is a dual language school. So I was able to get him registered in this school, and I really tried to help him in a lot of ways, including transportation, because the school was not in the neighborhood. So I picked him up after school the first day and asked him how was school, and he told me all about the Mayans and the sports that they enjoyed playing, and all of these things that he learned about the Mayans in school that day. And I just was so happy that he could understand the teacher who spoke Spanish to him, and he learned so much the first day of school and was so excited to tell me so much more than my kids did in the car that day. When I asked them what did you have for lunch, they can't remember, and that's it.
I will speak to the other side of this. I had two stories in mind, but I'm going to speak to the other side of
He's fixed you.
of things. For me, one of the hardest things is just the massive amount of need that exists. And it kind of feels like I could give 100% of my time and 100% of my dollars to different people. And as you meet them, they have your phone number, they ask for different things. And having to deal with that internal, I could, go, I got phone calls at 11 o'clock, can you help with this thing? And I could, but I hadn't been home the night before at 11 o'clock to be with my husband and my kids. And trying to live in a system where people don't have access to their needs, and when I do and juggle those feelings, I think has been something that's been really challenging for me, and thinking about what can I give and how and sustainably.
Right. What's the most frustrating misunderstanding or erroneous information that you hear about what's been going on? And the way I think about it is, if you could put a big billboard over the highway to just fix something that everyone thinks that's just not true or unhelpful, what would it be?
I think for me, is it working now? Okay. Okay.
Oh, I don't know.
Is it now not working because I might have turned it off?
We don't trust Jen with microphones, is what we learned here. Good at other stuff is what I'm saying.
I don't know if it's me or the microphone, but I think for me, something that I read in the news or I interpret in politics is that people arriving in the country seeking asylum are looking for handouts and are taking advantage of the system. And knowing the people personally who are arriving, they're all asking us for help with accessing work authorization papers because they want to be here working legally and contributing as part of society. Jenny was telling a story earlier, reflecting on a book she read about the Great Migration and about the people who actually made it and migrated were really motivated people. I mean, everything that you have to go through to get here, you're not looking for anyone to hand you anything. And if you do ask for things, it's because of the level of desperation, and you really do wish that you had access to, purchase those things for your children without having to ask anyone, including the government, for those things. So I think that feels frustrating.
Now you've done it.
Just to piggyback on that as well, I think this is a huge opportunity. Having all these migrants who are so motivated come to our city, I think could be framed as one way as a problem, or it could be framed as an opportunity. And I think we have all these instances of businesses that are looking for people to be employed. They need more workers. We heard like restaurants, I just read an article, have like only 80% of their staffing needs met. We have a huge number of people who come wanting to work. Let's use this as an opportunity to give them jobs, to make sure that they have their work permits and can work legally and contribute to the system that we have. I also think making sure that they have permanent sustainable housing is something that's really, really important, and not having to stay in the shelters. And so thinking more forward about how can we set people up for success in the future so that they can contribute to our city, I think is really important to think about. And one other thing that I think about a lot is, in politics right now, we have this situation that we see occasionally, setting communities that have little against one another and having them compete over small amount of resources. What I would love to see is for these communities to come together to advocate for more resources, to get more of their fair share of what's needed in order for everyone to be successful, because we can't divide our city further by saying, here are people who have been in our city for years and years and years and have been under-resourced, while providing more resources for people who have just come. We need to make sure that everyone rises together.
How has this whole experience affected your understanding of yourself and your community? And the community here might be other groups you're part of, your neighborhood, your school, whatever community might want to be for you. So how has it changed your perception? How are you different now than you were 18 months ago because of what's been going on?
I actually wrote a lot of answers here because this was a pretty reflective question for me. Because I think that is like the essence of, what I was trying to share earlier about mutual aid. It's not charity, right? So I'm also benefiting. Like, what am I getting out of this experience? And I do think about that. One thing I think that it's helped me do is to be more reflective and to be more patient with everyone, including myself. There are a lot of things that I don't understand that I've never had to experience, and I've really tried to remind myself to pause and take a breath and to think. I think that my problem-solving ability has gone way up because everything is like, okay, here's a problem, how do I solve it? And I think I'm more motivated because, it's not for me, it's someone else who desperately has a problem that they need to solve. But I also have a lot of answers, and I realize that, the answers that I have are actually most often not mine. I end up being a connector to someone who has the answers. So that's a skill that I have developed, and also just through confidence of knowing that I can find the answer. Like, there's so many times where like a problem pops up on my phone, because that's where they pop up. Señora, ¿puedes ayudarme? And I'm like, okay, what's this one? All right, okay, so you overstayed your welcome with your asylum papers. How do we get you legal authorization to be in this country? Who do I know? And so I think of myself now like as a connector. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to have all the money. But I need to be able to pause and reflect and have space to think, how can I play a role to advance this challenge for this person? I don't have to be the answer, but I'd like to be a step towards finding the answer.
I should have spoken first because I was going to talk about being a connector too, and then just understanding. I think being deep in the system, you really are forced to understand how the overall system works, and gaining that understanding. And again, just like what Jenn said, you don't need to have the answers, but knowing who to direct people to or how the system works so that you can get the answers, I think has been a huge skill for me to learn and to understand better. And I think, seeing community come together to build the world that we want to see for the future has been a really powerful thing for me to be a part of and to have conversations. I think the more conversations like this that are out there. I always use this analogy of like this ball, like we have this huge boulder that we're trying to like push up the hill. And it's not, you know, it takes a lot of effort. And I think these conversations add to that energy that we want to create about what this world we want to look like will involve. So I think eventually once we push the boulder up, it's going to start rolling. It just takes a lot of this type of work, and I think that I'm grateful to be in spaces and around people who have these visions, and we can help push that boulder together so it can start rolling down.
I'm going to throw you a thing out of left field, whatever that's called. A curveball, that's what it's called. Have you had occasion to become very disappointed in some, like, in the course of finding answers, you rely on your people you know who know stuff, or who you assume will pony it up in a pinch. And I'm just curious if you've I'll share one of mine. I was really disappointed the way one of the policemen spoke to me about the migrants that we were one day moving at. I was flabbergasted that he would say the things he said in that moment when we were trying to help these guys move out. And I still hold in my heart is like a hurt. I wasn't personally hurt, but I was sad to have seen a man talk that way about people who were right there and I think deserved to be talked about better. And I wondered how much of his attitude had permeated their experience just being in that room with him. I don't think most of the policemen, this is not true of most of the policemen, that's why it was notable, but I still feel bad about that. Like, I was really disappointed to hear those words from that man. I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge disappointment, the fact that Chicago says we're a welcoming city, yet we are not set up by any means to actually welcome people when they come. And just, you know, not that it's a surprise, I guess, but just it's another realization of how democracy works for the rich and the white, for the most part. And making sure, and just as this is a reminder that we don't have systems that are really supportive of all people, and I think I've talked about this maybe a couple times already, but just we all need to lift one another up, and I think we'll see further harm in communities as we get further and further apart from one another. And so I think having these systems that create that separation is really, really dangerous, and something that worries me and disappoints me for sure.
I have an experience where I think, I'll use the word accompaniment because that's from my paid job, how we think of the work that we do in our mission is accompanying people. So I was accompanying a woman through this experience from shelter into housing, and there's a state voucher system for the asylum seekers leaving shelter. At that time it was a 6-month voucher, which sounds fabulous, but you're giving it to someone who you are not providing work authorization to. So the disappointment is after 6 months when she couldn't pay her rent and she just had a new baby. She had another 5-year-old child. Her husband couldn't work. What was she supposed to do? Like, where's the safety net at that point? And when you leave the shelter, you have no more case management. The case management ends the day you leave the shelter. So if she hadn't met me, actually, I've never met her, to be honest with you. I've been helping her for a year. My phone number was passed to her through another woman who I did meet at a clothing distribution. And that's how my number gets, you know, I have about 30 families who I felt that way. And so she, señora, ¿puedes ayudarme? She didn't have the rent money. What could she do? So we mobilized essentially a GoFundMe and paid her rent until we could get rental support through another organization, until we could push, you know, wait for the work authorization. You know, all these things that have to get put in place for someone to be able to have stable housing. But these people are now not on anyone's radar. And that's really disappointing.
How have social, oh, you already touched on this a little bit, but I'm gonna say it anyway in case there's more you wanna say. How has social services and policy been changing to meet the influx of folks? And what are some important issues that policymakers still need to be addressing? You can repeat if you want more about the housing, but how have you seen it, has it gotten better over the last year? And what are the major things that still need big attention?
I mean, I think it's gotten much, much better. That's not saying it's good, but I think that's just kind of showing how difficult it was at the very beginning. At the very beginning, we were providing all meals for all people at the station. There was no case management, there was not enough shelters. So I have seen the city make progress in making sure at the very end, obviously now they're out of the shelters.
Police stations.
Sorry, yes, they're out of the police stations. A lot of them are on buses at the landing zone, which again is not much better or questionably worse than being on the floor of the police station. I think that the city started to provide some more meals. They started to provide more and more services, vaccine clinics, things like that were starting to happen at the police stations, which was for us as a newly formed mutual aid group, something that really helped us. One thing that I think is really important, again, talking not from a professional standpoint, but just from like my position as a concerned citizen, on the ballot, anyone in Chicago will be voting on a referendum called Bring Chicago Home, which creates a revenue for people who are, creates revenue to make sure that we have permanent funding stream to address homelessness and wraparound services for the unhoused in our city. We do not have currently any type of permanent revenue stream in Chicago, which is really, really difficult because no city agency who is working to support homeless individuals is able to count on the fact that their programming will continue the following year. And that makes it really, really challenging. I also think passing Bring Chicago Home is very important because if you look at the amount of money that Chicago spends on addressing homelessness compared to like LA or New York, we spend pennies per person where these other cities are spending $1 to $2 more than we are per person. And I just think that it's really important that if we all want our own personal public safety, we need to ensure the public safety of everyone in Chicago. And I know for sure for my family, and I'm sure everyone here agrees, that our house is one of the things that gives us the most amount of security in the city. So look for that on your ballot, anyone who is in Chicago. And I would definitely recommend voting yes for that referendum.
Ask me the question again.
Yeah, social, what's changed? Over the last year, what's changed and gotten better and what still needs to be attended to?
So over the last year, I think what has been a positive is just the outpouring of support in the community. Like I said, we had a Facebook page that blew up to 14,000 people who actually care enough to join, and all these mutual aid groups, every police station, 25 police stations had a mutual aid group spring up around the police station. And for our group, I think there's almost 200 members. We have teams, for each police station, a food team and a donation team and a housing team, immigration, there are just so many pieces, there's so many needs. And so, we just organically, naturally created these different ways, different support systems, like informal support systems on our own that, they just don't exist in the city structure. And that's really heartening, that's really heartening. It just says a lot about our city. I'm really proud of that. I've met incredible people. I've met my people, the people who feel about things that I do. And, we didn't have to do speed dating. We just showed up at the police station, So that's heartening for me to see. It's really, really incredible the things that people do and they don't want to be thanked for it. They're not doing it to get their picture up anywhere, or it's, you know, even coming here today, like it's, you know, uncomfortable for us because, you know, we don't want credit, like we don't want anyone to thank us. That's not why we're doing it, you know. If we were doing it for that reason, we would be doing something else, we wouldn't be here, you know. So, like, I love that. And repeat the question one more time, because there was another part to it.
So what has been changing, and what are some of the important issues that policymakers should address?
Yeah. So for sure housing, you know, is a huge issue. And I think, you know, as Jenny mentioned, one piece of this, which is also very heartening, is because this situation has brought to light a lot of things that were invisible to all of us for decades, or at least most of us. And so, you know, we look around now at our unhoused population. We look around now at those who have not had legal documentation for decades, and we start to wonder, like, how can we take what we did in the middle of this chaos and apply it in other ways to help these other populations that have been so disenfranchised? And it gives me hope that we can do that.
And so my last question before we'll then have an interlude before Q&A. Given your impression of the current state of affairs, what's the best way for folks to get involved with their time, money, or advocacy? And I don't know if you only know the Chicago story or if you know anything about the suburbs or if that's importantly different. Call 1-800-JENNY-WINS.
I'm just trying to process, you know, like
right.
The question and then the answer and the pieces.
The best way to get involved, time, money, or advocacy. If everybody here went away to do something, what should they go away and do?
Advocating for work permits, I think, is huge. That's at a federal level. So making sure you talk to your federal elected leaders and let them know that this is something that you want to see. I also think one thing that's new to the 19th District Mutual Aid Group and that I'm excited for, and Jenn probably knows more about it than I do, but the alder people in the district are setting up some ways to kind of expedite, to make sure people can get all their paperwork to get their work permits filled out and can move towards legal work. So that would be a great way. I also think there's been a couple of different organizations that we have worked with in the 19th District who have done a lot of great work, who are also working their hardest and need a lot of support, either financially, mostly financially probably. Our places like Nuevos Vecinos has been a great organization and partner for the 19th District.
Yeah, I don't actually know a lot about what Evanston particularly has been doing, so I don't want to speak on that, but I do know that there's been a great push to get involvement of the townships outside of the city involved. And so if that's something you'd be interested in doing politically, I would definitely suggest that, you know, that Evanston is also a welcoming place and what that would mean, you know, and talking to your electeds about that and, you know, thinking that through and pushing for those things in Evanston as well. I think in terms of getting involved, it's a little scary to put yourself out there and to accompany someone. But it is the best way to understand the challenges of what is going on in the trajectory of someone's new life here. So I just put that out there to think about that. For example, we see posts, there's a few Facebook pages and WhatsApp chats, and new people will join and say, I found this family at the grocery store parking lot, what do I do? And so you may find yourself in that position and unsure what to do. And so by getting involved and learning what people do in those situations could be helpful for you if you have found yourself in that situation, or you have thought, I should stop and talk to them, but I don't speak Spanish and I don't know what to do, and I don't have any capacity really to help right now. in terms of capacity for helping, if you feel like you don't have that capacity to have a conversation with that person and find out, are they in a shelter? What are they actually asking for? And finding out like how you could help them with the things that they do need. You can also donate money. There's lots of places that are doing great work. So there's Amazon wish lists all over the place. So you could order, winter coats or warm clothes or baby items, diapers, that is all out there and available. And so advocacy, getting involved personally, or donating, I think are the ways, and also just educating yourself, reading up on things and understanding the issues so that you come to it with some understanding of what other people have learned or the conversations that they're having.
I just have one more thing. I'm gonna lift you up in the work that Jenn does a lot, and one of the things that she was just talking about in the car is the way that she helps people who are ready to move into their house.
Yeah.
Is there are do you want to talk about it instead of me, because you
What was your point?
that she does a lot of great work to help people move, get the funding that they need to move to get the furniture that they need to move in. And I was just going to say, if anyone is, I know they're always, once you're on once someone has your phone number, all the migrant community has your phone number. So I know that Jenn gets a lot of text messages about needing help. And if anyone here is willing, you said it was like 370.
325.
So what Jenny's alluding to is through the Refugee Community Connection, there's an agreement with the Chicago Furniture Bank. So you could donate furniture, for example, to the Chicago Furniture Bank, which then will be available. And basically, I'm a volunteer caseworker. So when someone says to me, and I hear it in my head in Spanish, but I moved into my house and I have nothing. Can you help me? My friend gave me your number. And so then I have a series of questions that I ask them, and then I register them with the Refugee Community Connection, and then I have access to the Furniture Bank, and I figure out, if there's a donor available, if I can have the furniture delivered to their house. And I can get that done. We can get that done on our team in about 2 days. So they will have, secondhand furniture, but they'll have a bed to sleep in, because what we find is that people get the voucher from the shelter and they move into the house and they have nothing, and there's no caseworker. In some cases, in the beginning, there was, some furniture provided or some beds provided, but the need is just like overwhelming. And so, they'll be sleeping on the floor. We're finding with our work through the 19th district that on our intake form for the shelter that's nearby us, people are asking for blankets. There were a few different reasons, but one of the reasons we realized why they were asking us for blankets is because they're about to move and they're about to sleep on the floor, and there's no help for them. And then they, get my number, and then I can get them the furniture delivered for $325. Or if I don't have enough money, then I can see if I can find a volunteer who will drive a U-Haul, and then it's $100, and we have to pay for the U-Haul rental and the gas. But we make it work. So every time I get a request, then I have to kind of triangulate to figure out, because there's no money, there's no fund that I can just get reimbursed from. So I have to figure out how to make this work. And it has worked every time so far. We got 4 families furniture delivered on Friday, because Donald drove a U-Haul and did 2 furniture appointments and got 3 families furniture, while I got a $325 actual delivery from the furniture bank to a 4th family. And then we have free stores, which is another piece of it. So after they get the furniture, back in the old days, before the buses came, the Afghan families could make an appointment and come pick out what they wanted for, their housewares, dishes, pots, pans, and they still do. But the free store is so overwhelmed that the way that I do it now is I get all the information from the family of what they need, and then I put in a request, and the volunteers at the free store are the shoppers and pack up everything. So my car is loaded right now with a family's set to deliver to Auburn Gresham this afternoon after my son's first cello concert.
So if you're interested in helping out with that, see Jenn, because she's doing very, very good work.
You could be a driver, you know, it doesn't
Right.
even take money, I mean, other than gas money.
So we're going to pause for a minute for our interlude, and it's a time for you to think about if you have any questions. And if I think your question is not helpful, I will intervene, but hopefully that won't be an issue. During the interlude, if you are inclined to donate, we are always grateful for donations. We always say $5 if you have it, but we're actually happy for anything. There's a basket in the back if you want to do it old school, and there's a QR code, and you can do it on your phone. And now we'll have our little interlude. You don't have to look, but there's a little video. Doing okay? No problem. There's no God here, so we don't have anybody to talk to. We will be done in a half an hour. We'll be done in a half an hour. 35 minutes. It's no cues, it won't be. Oh, I can remember. I suspect it will be, but I think people, the main thing people ask is how do you get involved, so that was why. I know. We think it's a lot of user. I think it's both of them.
Test, test.
You guys okay? You did great. It's all good. Everyone. Are we back on? Welcome back. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, remember you can put a question along the side and it will eventually show up in my phone, if I remember to look at my phone. Oops. If you're in this room and you have a question, then you can come over to this microphone and we will try to address it. But we might have been so comprehensive that there are no questions. Who could know? Dan Kaplan has a question. He's a curious fellow. Oh, and Carmen. Hey, go for it.
You want to go first?
No, you, come on. Carmen, you're going to win.
First, gracias por lo que hacen.
De nada.
You touched my heart. I was one of those 1995, so I thank you very much for what you're doing. But what I'm struggling right now, because I'm trying also to return to the community, is that to really identify if that's a really real organization or not. Because I recently just experienced that we went to volunteer, my family, because I tried to instill that in my kids. And I felt more like we were doing a show. We were not helping. And that kind of was really bothersome for me. And I said, I'm not coming back there. But I don't know if everybody had the same feeling as I did at that time, and should be different. I think I should be there to help, but was more like, hey, let me take your picture and we're gonna show you. And I was like, how can I filter to be sure I'm really going to a place that I'm gonna help? Because when I was there, I was really disappointed that I was not helping. I was being kind of put like, hey, you're gonna be on a show, you know?
I hear you. I also work in nonprofit, so I have the experience of where you're getting your money from grants, and you know you're high-level donors, and you need to write reports, and you need to show all the things that you're doing with the grant money that you were given. So there's lots, you know, you have to take photos, and so we've struggled with this. Like I've struggled with this in my work. In my paid life, I manage a program in Haiti. And you can imagine it's so difficult to then show donors, you know, the pictures of our program recipients who I don't want to exploit. I don't want to put them in a position where, you know, they need to take a photo to someone who gave money, you know, who they'll never meet. But so I've had to, you know, walk that line of like helping donors understand what their money is doing and accomplishing without exploiting the people who are receiving the benefits and the support of the program. So I see the struggle with nonprofit organizations. For example, we have a free store called Nuevos Vecinos, New Neighbors Free Store in Uptown. It used to be in Westridge in my neighborhood. And there was an organization that seemed to be doing really great work, and I asked them if they could help us donate some hygiene kits. And they said they could do that, but they needed to hand them directly to the people, and they needed to take pictures. And we said, no, thank you, because we don't do it that way. We have a store, and we bring the things in, and it's really very beautiful. And if you would ever like to volunteer there, I would like to accompany you to volunteer there. What's so lovely about it is that the asylum seekers who have benefited from the free store then volunteer in the free store. So it's really run by the asylum seekers, and it's pretty cool. And they don't have work authorization, otherwise they would be out working and getting paid. And that does happen where we lose really good volunteers, because then they get their work authorization and they go work, and then we get a new set of people. But I think they feel great themselves about being able to help new people come. So when they're running the store, you know, the donors, you know, have worked together to get the supplies, but the asylum seekers who are volunteering there can welcome the new people coming in. And it's packed. Sometimes we serve 200 to 250 new arrivals to shelter in 1 3-hour store period. And we do it 3 days a week.
Yeah, I kind of want to just expand on your first point, because I think it's a really big deal, which is the difference of what we've been doing, and your question about how do you find, is there a real organization? It's a great question, and it reflects something that was said early on, which is, are we a real organization? Like, I think we are very real. There are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people doing this, and it is real in that I've given uncountable carloads of stuff to people who needed the things, and they got them. It is not real because there's no paperwork with the state. You can't get tax deduction if you donate money. Like, it's not real in the architecture of an NGO that you're used to thinking about. And you can't find us on those to see how efficient we are, whatever. It's 100% efficient because there's nobody getting a salary, there's no building, there's no phone system, there's no heat. So whatever people do, 100% goes to people who need the thing. But it's also not real in the sense of what we're used to and we've been trained up to think about as a legit enterprise. So it's kind of turning, what we're about has been, or what mutual aid is about, kind of turns on its head what is real. Because to me, to your point, there's no photo ops. No one needs a photo. Like, I'm not accountable to anybody, which is a mixed blessing, right? If I'm not accountable to anybody, I could be doing really terrible things. I'm not, just in case you're worried. But it also means I'm not posing for anybody. I got blankets to people who are cold. And it's just true because I told you, but hopefully they're warmer, but I think they're still cold.
The other beautiful thing I think about mutual aid groups and this type of like fluid work is that the situation is so fluid and the situation is constantly changing. That was like one of the biggest takeaways that I have taken from this whole experience is like every week, there's a different situation, different needs and different things that we were trying to work on. So it like there's nothing at all static about what's happening and things are always changing. Which also can create chaos, a little bit of chaos, but trying to be organized in that chaos, I think, is something that we've been working at.
Dan, did you have a question?
So I know you don't want thank yous, but thank you. I'd like to hear more about the transition process and the barriers. So someone comes in on the bus, they need work permit. How long does that take? What are the problems in getting a work permit? And then the March 1 deadline for getting out of the, I guess, police stations
No, they're gone.
or the city shelters. I mean, what does that mean and what's going to happen?
We got a phone ringing up here and I thought I'd turn it off. Oh, it's my alarm for something else. Yeah, so for the work authorizations, the way that that's working, so if someone arrives at the border, for example, on January 1st, 2023, they have until January 1st, 2024 to initiate their asylum application, 1 year. And once they've initiated their asylum application, then they can apply for their work authorization. However, if they applied, if they come from certain countries and they arrive by a certain time, then they may be eligible for temporary protected status. And if they are, then they can also apply for the work authorization at the same time that they apply for the temporary protected status. So one of the challenges is that we don't have enough pro bono legal aid support. So here you have people with no money to get a lawyer, and our asylum system is so convoluted, and there's no pro bono, no legal aid available for I don't know what it is now, it might be 6 months if you call around. So what do people do? This is another situation where we were chatting about in the car. I have crowdfunded for the application for temporary protected status and work authorization for a family that I know is vulnerable to eviction and homelessness with children, and I felt a moral imperative to support their application. And I have a reputable lawyer that I was able to find through the groups that we work with who was able to help, and she currently has her work authorization and is seeking employment. So that's kind of like the big picture, and then like the little picture of how we can help. And then your other question was about shelter and what's going to happen with the eviction notices. So, the goalposts keep changing with the timing. When people are evicted, it also depends on when they arrived, the eviction dates. There is definitely a political game at play where the city government is playing a game of tennis with the state government, the federal government. We have an election coming up. We have the Democratic National Convention coming. So while there are people who would like to make political change, there may be reasons why they feel they can't, and that is definitely impacting the city's funding and ability to shelter people. Does that answer your question? What can be done about it? Keep pressuring every elected official that you have.
I think, where do these people go? I mean, what?
When they're evicted?
Yes.
They will have to go back to the landing zone, which is by the Greyhound station, and then reapply for shelter.
Tough process.
I've been reading a little bit about it, and I have to admit I haven't followed it closely. But the buses dropping people off in various suburban communities. So they go out and they'll go to a metro station, drop them off, or there'll be some other suburban location. I like the idea of the mutual aid model of a sort of it's almost like a flash mob kind of approach to providing assistance. And I'm wondering, one, what happens, what is the dynamic going on there? If they get dropped off at some suburban location, do they end up getting on the train and heading to the city? Or, and if so, is there a model that people who are concerned in suburban communities can organize around, or get some, get some sort of framework that they can organize to provide some sort of assistance for people who are in these situations where they're being dropped off in locations that are outside the city?
Good question. And I have a little bit of a little thought on that, and if you have any other, I think that's happening less and less. I hear about that less and less in the past week or 2 weeks or so. But again, I think mutual aid groups have done like a fantastic job. There's the WhatsApp chats between either the 19th District Mutual Aid and all these different, there's like a mutual aid leaders across the whole city. People have their ear to the ground and are able, there's always like, there was a bus dropped off at Crystal Lake, like who can grab them? So somehow I don't know how it happened, but the mutual aid, and I think a lot of it is because migrants have phone numbers and can get the word to different people who need it. That's how I've been finding out about it. And then the mutual aid leaders let the city know, and then the city has done a reasonably good job at getting the people from wherever they were dropped off to the city and then to the landing zone. They don't all get all the supplies that they need at the landing zone always, and often Jenn knows more about this, but come to shelter without their basic supplies that we were hoping that they would get at the landing zone. As far as what people can do, that is a tough one. I was gonna say, if you see something, like if you see people at a station, I think trying to get in touch with someone from the city is a good way to make sure that they can then be routed to the right people in the city. Do you have any better?
311.
And police stations. They can, if they show up at a police station in the city, which is what some of these guys did do, if they ended up on transit, which is what I heard those also, if they show up at a police station, the police station will theoretically anyway, let them stay until someone from the city emergency operations guys show up and help. So
Yeah.
It's a very practical matter. The police stations are still a gateway into it.
And 311 is also a great way to get the cities, alert the city that something's happening, and they'll get them to the station or to the landing zone.
And, sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, in terms of language, because that can feel like a barrier. Like, how can I go up and speak to someone when I don't speak Spanish? Google Translate has gotten better, especially with Spanish. So it's not perfect, but if you are inclined at all, download the app for Google Translate onto your phone and play around with it, because there's a function. I know I walked Katie through it, and she's been really successful with it, so she can actually walk you through it with conversations. So, you can go up to someone and you can speak into the Google Translate, hi, how are you? It looks like you need help. What kind of help do you need? And then it will speak out loud on the microphone in Spanish to them, so they can hear it in Spanish. And then they can speak into the microphone in Spanish, and you can hear in English their response. So I feel like, you know, that can feel like such a barrier to people, but it can be overcome. So if you have confidence using it, like you can practice with Katie, then when you're at, you know, the grocery store parking lot and you think, you know, I'm gonna try, you can try, you know. And to warn you, the first time you try anything, it's really hard and you think, I did a really bad job. And then you think about, like, how could I do that better next time? You know, and it's a huge learning curve, all of this.
Well, I just wanted to share a quick anecdote on that, because I've been helping a family who is now housed, and they're getting married in Rockford, and I drove them on Thursday to get the license, and I'm driving them tomorrow to do the wedding. And through the miracle of phone translation, when I got home from dropping them at home Thursday, after driving to Rockford and back, I got the following: I am truly grateful to you for all this help that you have not provided. And I feel like that was just a glitch, and I'm ignoring the not.
That's the disclaimer, right?
And it's not, so, but it's tricky because I don't have any Spanish. Thank you, French and Latin. And it's so tricky because the sense of it can just go sideways. So I often end up saying back to her, I did not understand that. Can you say it again? So in this instance, I'm just going to assume she really meant the opposite. But when I'm asking a specific question that has consequences, it feels a little fraught. So I have now recruited 3 Spanish speakers in my life. Hey, can you get on a call with me and so? And they're like, okay. So I now have enlisted human translation in real time. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to add that a lot of the migrants also are very familiar with Google Translate, so if you do need help, they can help you use it too. Mutual aid right there.
So there's an online question, and then we'll let Vicki ask hers. I have been hearing about people trying to house immigrants in their own homes and how doing that screws up the process and does more harm than good. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so that used to be really true. It's somewhat true now. It used to be true because when people were getting into shelter, they were getting the vouchers for 6 months for the rental assistance and some other legal assistance. Now, there are a lot of people in shelter that have no voucher access, and those that do may get 3 months of voucher access, which is really hard to sell to a landlord that, you know, someone with no credit history and no job on a 3-month voucher, you know, that they're going to want to rent to them. But on the flip side, I would say if it's something that someone is thinking about in terms of taking in a family, I would not discourage it, but I would encourage talking to other people who have done it. And I particularly know someone in Evanston who has done it. So if there is someone who's interested in that, I can connect them to help understand exactly what that commitment would mean. And then also understanding for yourself, what are your own boundaries? Because that's really important, and it's something that I've learned over time. I mean, I came to this with a little bit of understanding of that. I don't have a social work background, but I often wish I had a social work degree. Public health was great, but you know, the social work would really apply. So I think boundaries are really important to think through, like, what's your commitment? So if you're gonna take in a family, for how long? And, you know, what size family? You know, what size is your house? Are you gonna, you know, feed them? Are they gonna do the cooking and you buy the groceries? You know, like, are you gonna do the volunteer case management stuff? Like, you know, are you gonna spend time connecting them to medical resources if they have a medical issue? You know, there's a host of needs. You know, my advice would be to think about creating a welcome group. So although you may be the one hosting in your house for a certain amount of time, that you have a group of people who have committed to be with you on that journey, who can be the people doing the casework, volunteer casework outside, and linking them into the resources that they need, so it's not all on the person who's hosting the family.
Tiny little thing I learned about that, because I've been thinking about it, was that in Chicago, even if they're not paying rent, they end up protected by tenant laws pretty quickly. So if someone stays in your home for some pretty short period of time in Chicago, they become protected by regular tenant laws.
So you
And
want to be educated. on
so you, even if you don't want to charge rent and anything, you still might write a lease and put boundaries
Yes.
on it, just even so that you do have some control over your house, because that's worrisome. But I don't think that means don't do it, it just means do it with your eyes wide open. Vicki?
So mine is not really a question, it's a comment for others who are here. I've been involved pretty deeply in the migrant crisis in Oak Park, where I live. And Oak Park is one of the few suburbs that accepted buses of migrants from Venezuela. And the Oak Park situation right now is that our shelters are closing at the end of February, and we are working really, really hard to get as many as we can into apartments this month. And we're really fortunate that we have funding to use Chicago Furniture Bank, so we're able to get the furnishings without doing any fundraising for that. But what we don't have is just the other smaller household goods that are not furniture. And so I have my visitor badge on, but I've been attending here regularly, and I'll be at the coffee hour too. So if any of you want to do your spring cleaning just a little bit early, I would be happy to take things from you, either come to your home if it's a lot, or pick it up here like next week if you would want to bring it with you, and to take those things to Oak Park so migrants there can put them to good use. Thanks.
Can I piggyback on your comment?
Yeah.
So I know with the free stores, with the Refugee Community Connection free stores, that they have, because of the high need, have started creating kitchen kits. Mm-hmm. So that's something that, maybe anywhere could be organized, whether it's here or in Oak Park, but putting together a basic set that has pots, pans, plates, cups, utensils, for a family, and other things that, the other utensils that you need to cook. It doesn't have to be super fancy, it could be basic. Yeah. A lot of people are asking for blenders, microwaves. They're asking for TV, which you can learn English from TV. So the sky is the limit, but just like the basic kitchen kit is so nice. And it's also nice sometimes to focus on one part of it. Mm-hmm. I know if you have a whole household, then I know from experience that it's the sheets and it's the blankets and it's the towels, and people still need clothing and clothing for the season and shoes for kids. And we can think of our own homes and all the things that make it home, as well as the cleaning supplies and the hygiene supplies. Like, it really is endless. But just calling out the kitchen kits, because if someone gets housing, and they're sleeping on the floor, if they have a kitchen set, at least they can cook. If they have like the basic like larder, like beans and corn flour, they can make, and some cheese, they can, make some basic meals the first couple nights,
Yeah, we have a church that's generously allowed us to use storage space in their fellowship hall. So we've just been gathering everything that we can as quickly as possible, but this is a sizable group, I wanted to do a pitch.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks.
I have one other question. We hear a lot about the migrants coming from Venezuela. It's sort of like them from there. Can you describe, give these people a face? Who are they? What's their story? Are they families? What are their circumstances? How did they get into this? What do they bring with them? I think we think of a lot of migrants as people who are needy, but they actually have some attributes and capacities and capabilities that they bring with them too. So if you could just fill in the blanks, like who are these people, and
Yeah, people are coming from lots of different countries. It's not just Venezuela. So there are a lot of like Cuba and Haiti and Nicaragua and Ecuador, as well as people from Mexico who have been coming here. They're invisible to us, but they're our neighbors. I was just talking to a neighbor who, before the buses were arriving from the border at the YMCA at 2 a.m. Western, she was saying, well, that used to be an encampment for unhoused, undocumented Mexicans. And I never knew that because I drive to the grocery store right there, but she walks to the grocery store right there, and she got to know them, and then they all disappeared. And they were afraid of ICE finding them, and that's why, you know, they were hiding, you know, they wanted to work, they were looking for jobs, and it's very challenging. Remind me of your question again, because I'm
Who are
going
the
on a
people?
tangent.
Who are
I
they?
mean,
Who
just
are
give
they?
us a portrait of who these people might be. Is it young families?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they displaced because of economic reasons, like they had agricultural land that they can't work anymore? Are they, you know, there's political disruption, that kind of thing? And
All of the above, you know, so it's not like one profile, and you know, so if you're talking about Venezuelans, you know, there are a lot of reasons. And then the Venezuelans that are coming, we do have a lot of families that are coming with children. We also have a lot of single men who left their children at home, and they're coming here. So, you know, you come to find out that they were the person who was sent to be the breadwinner, to get the job, and then they can't work legally. So they're in front of Home Depot trying to get the day laboring jobs, and then they're, you know, by the police or the aldermen sent, you know, they can't stand in front of Home Depot anymore, you know, even to get like a cash job for that day, which is totally underpaid. But at the end of the day, they take that money, they go to Western Union, and they send it home so that the caregiver of the children can feed the kids that day.
I have data. Do you want me to give you? 2 weeks ago, the place that we've been organizing our supplies, donations and supplies to send things to the folks at the shelter when they ask for it, we started a new process, and we've been gathering data. Charlie, this is for you. So the one that we got, I think this is the most recent, just by age distribution, like just in the last 2 weeks, who has asked the group that we're working with for help at the shelter that we're at. The age distribution is, there's basically nobody over 50. 14% of the people are under 3, and a total of 40% are under 11. So it's a lot of kids, and the single biggest age category is 21 to 30. It was 24% of the folks. So it's young families. Like,
And that's a family shelter, so some of the
Right.
shelters are singles shelters. What's sad is that if people are married but they come here without their children and they leave them with grandparents, they can't stay in the same shelter because there are men's shelters and there are women's shelters, there are family shelters. So if they come with their kids, they can stay together in the shelter, but if not, they get separated. And that's traditionally how Chicago has done shelters.
and to that point, in Chicago, the different shelters have different, some of them have families, some of them don't. There's one over on Elston by the Salt Shed, the new concert venue. And that one is, I think, mostly single men, in my impression. And one of the sort of creative mutual aid things that's grown up there is a couple blocks south, there's a public area that he's created. He's trying to create a work cooperative for these guys who want to have shovels and go shovel the next snow. Like, he's like, buy a shovel, I'll pick it up at Home Depot if you put it on pickup. And he's trying to create like construction, like ad hoc construction things, and creating a work crew around the fact that it's a bunch of single men who have construction or garden kind of work. He's trying to create a workers cooperative for them, which who knows if it'll work, but it's the kind of thing that's happening all over the place. We just don't know all the details. And there's not good data, I think. I don't know if that helped, Charlie. Did it help?
that's great.
The family I'm helping, the wife or the mom was in nursing school, and they left Venezuela before she finished her degree, and the dad is a construction guy,
Yeah.
and the 4-year-old's adorable.
I just think it's really important that we recognize that these are people and they have lives and histories. They're not an abstraction.
Right.
And I think the more abstract it is, I think it's easier to be distanced from it, and for those who are inclined to dehumanize them. And I think that we just need to be conscious of that.
Okay, on that point, when we were driving home from Rockford on Thursday, the mom was saying how she knows everyone. What do I think of them? Because they have nothing, and I look at them and see them as people of nothing. She had asked me that on the way out, and I said something at the time, and then on the way back, I said, I just need to clarify. I don't look at you as somebody who has nothing. I look at you as someone who has no things, but you have so much, and so much of it is things I don't, like, that is so much more important than the things. And she kind of was like, seemed a little delighted. And I think that as much as we can know that and see them as individual people, I think so many things that have happened to them over the last many months has only made them feel like people who don't have anything. And I think that's one of the, for me, longer term concerns I have about almost trauma therapy and like how to, you do have things, even if you don't have things, kind of, it's tough. Did you have a question, Anita?
Actually, I had two. One is when you get the furniture and the kitchen kits and everything to people, and they're in an apartment for 3 months or 6 months, and then they lose their apartment. What happens to the stuff that they can't take with them? Wouldn't it be a way to encourage renters to keep that apartment for them, to leave the beds and everything that they have acquired there, even if they have to go back to the shelter, because then somebody else can come in and you don't have to duplicate the wheel, reinvent the wheel, getting more beds and stuff?
I have to be honest, I don't have that experience yet. I have experience fighting to keep people in the housing that they're in. So, or transitioning. Like I have one family that I'm working with right now, like I said, we were able to raise the money to keep her in the apartment. They want to move. The other issue is like the way that the apartments are being set up through Catholic Charities. A lot of times families are moving into apartments that they couldn't afford on their own. So with the voucher, they could get this apartment for X amount of money, but when the voucher's done, they can actually afford that apartment, even if they have work authorization.
Ooh, yeah. So the voucher isn't 100% of the rent? It's a portion?
Yeah, the vouchers will cover 100% of the rent.
But for a finite period of time.
And utilities and a move-in fee, but for a period of time. So it used to be 6 months, it's 3 months now, if you have access to it. So families that came after November 31st won't have access to a voucher anyway. So like, I don't have an answer for your question because I haven't been in that situation of where people have had to leave things behind. It's more a matter of like, when I'm involved, I'm trying to figure out how to keep them in the housing or to get them to alternative housing. So this one family, because of her language barrier now, she's trying to find new apartments that she can afford, but she can't speak English. And she's trying to explain to them, I don't have a credit history, and we have, since we started working, now they have 3 months of paychecks they can provide for work history, but they don't have the year that's required by these management companies. So she's like, Señora, can you call them for me? Can you tell them I'm a good person? Can you tell them I promise I'll pay? So I
But
call
that doesn't go far with the management
in
companies.
English, and they explain to me about the Fair Housing Act and how all these things work, and then we go back to the drawing board. So there's a lot more I could explain to you about how all of that works.
But it's still something to think about. So, maybe you could get volunteers to take that furniture back and store it someplace until they're ready to move to a different place.
Well, that's the thing about volunteering is we're super nimble, and like someone said earlier, I love the flash mob metaphor because there's always problem solving, right? So you have a particular family that you're in touch with and they have a problem, and then you figure out how to manage the problem. And that's, comes back to what you're saying. You have the situation, so how do you work out that particular family situation with the volunteers?
The second thing I wanted to say is just my pet peeve. Like, I went to Costco on Tui for gas this morning, and every time I see the Leaning Tower Y empty and probably going to be demolished, it kills me that somebody isn't at least, I assume that the Y still owns that property. Even if it's for sale, could they not use that for temporary housing? That would be hundreds and hundreds of units and, play areas for the kids and classrooms and gym area. It drives me nuts. Is there any effort to at least use that until it's been sold? Or make it permanent?
We got no knowledge about that one. There's a hotel, an empty hotel 3 blocks from me that makes me weep. But yes, I think that's a very frustrating, that's back to the city's response and deploying resources in a way that hasn't been ahead. And it takes more time and effort than we know. I appreciate that, but still. We're gonna, go ahead.
Just one last thing to add to that point, because I know that's a lot of frustration of a lot. There are so many empty buildings in Chicago. But also thinking towards like what are permanent solutions, like looking for permanent housing, instead of continuing to expand our shelter capacity, looking for expanding the rental to make sure we have places for people to stay permanently.
Right.
That's something to consider.
That makes sense. we're at time for the end of this part, but I just want to thank you guys very much. Yay!
Thank you so much.
And it's usual that we have announcements and then I have closing words, but I'm going to do my closing words now and then still do announcements. You have to stay for the announcements. But I want to do it because the closing words I want to use, several weeks ago, I was at the place where we store the donations, and some of the other volunteers were talking about how frustrating it is to get, like their parents, is a 30-year-old woman. And my parents think we're crazy because it's like, we need the city to fix it. Like, we're taking blankets to these people at the shelter, and then tomorrow more people need blankets at the shelter, and it needs to be a more systematic response. And we were talking about that, and I said this thing that I'm about to say to you guys, and you've probably heard this before, but this sort of corny thing about the starfish on the beach. And it started in a book from the 1960s, and I have the author's name, but I'm not going to look it up. It's morphed into a bunch of different versions, but you've heard something like, a man's walking down the beach and there's all these sea stars stranded on the beach, the tide is receding, and there's a little kid picking up sea stars and throwing them into the ocean. And the man goes up and goes, why are you doing that? It can't make a difference. There are so many. And the little kid picks up a sea star, throws it into the ocean and said, it made a difference to that one. And I know that's really corny, but it really helps me. I'm a policy guy, and I want a policy solution, and I want it to scale up. But I'm also going to just throw one little sea star in as I walk down the beach and hope that at least that little sea star is doing okay. So that has helped me a lot, and I think this woman went and called her parents and told them about the sea stars. So those are my closing words, but we're not closing yet because I'm going to read the announcements. So pretend that didn't happen. On Monday, February 5th, which I think is tomorrow, at 7:15, the film discussion group is going to meet and talk about Anatomy of a Fall and Barbie. It's virtual through our Zoom link. If you call the office, you can get more info or access to the Zoom link if you don't know how to do that. And those are both available on Amazon Prime Video. Our next game night will be on Friday, February 9th, which is this coming up Friday, beginning at 6 p.m. Join us for an evening of board games, conversation, and good company. This is a great low-key event for all ages. We'll have several games available, but feel free to bring some of your own. If you can, please bring a dish to share. Next Sunday, February 11th, is our Community Day program. Will feature some of our talented EHS members sharing our skills. We will have stations with members teaching chess, knitting, yoga, sign language, and music theory. Come with your curiosity and listening ear for this engaging community day. As one of the knitting people, I just want to say something about talented. I'm not so sure, but I am able. On the knitting, if you're interested in learning how to knit and you have a knitting project in mind, bring needles and yarn. And if you're just kind of curious, if you're knitting curious, we'll have some things just to help you get started to see how it goes. On Sunday, February 18th, 2 weeks from today, Cindy Schaffer, co-author of the award-winning book Molly's War, will present The Journey of Molly's War, WACS and World War II. Cindy will discuss women in the military during World War II by taking us on a journey from inspiration to publication. Using excerpts from her mother's letters written home, Cindy provides a romantic yet frightful glimpse into the life of a woman in uniform during this crucial time in history. Our Humanist Kids are sponsoring a food drive to benefit the clients of the Niles Township Food Pantry. There's a flyer on the table in the reception area with a list of items most needed, along with a box to collect your donations. For more information on upcoming Sunday morning programs and other activities, see our website at ethicalhumanistsociety.org, connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to the YouTube channel for videos of past speakers and future streaming programs. Now remember the sea stars. And then we're done. Join us for the coffee hour. Thanks. Were you there with the day we did the sea stars? Were you there when we had that?